What's up, ladies? Welcome to the Health Class She Deserves, where we talk all about women's health and bodies, how to know yourself better, what the research says versus discourse online, and of course, our personal experiences. I'm your host, Autumn Payon, and today we are diving into PMDD with Camilla Brinkworth. She's a degree-qualified naturopath, nutritionist, and trauma-informed emotional healing practitioner specializing in PMDD, plant-based health, gut health, and root cause recovery. What truly sets her apart is the way she weaves science, soul, and lived experience into a deeply compassionate approach that gets real results. She created PMDD Naturopath to help women overcome PMDD from the core with one-on-one support, online courses, and healing retreats. After years of battling her own PMDD, anxiety, depression, panic attacks, and debilitating arthritis, despite knowing all of the right things, Camilla discovered that true healing requires more than supplements and clean eating. It takes nervous system repair, emotional integration, and being seen as a whole person, not as a diagnosis. Now based in Ubud, Bali, Camilla works internationally helping women who've been dismissed, misdiagnosed, or told they're just too sensitive find lasting relief and real transformation through naturopathy, trauma resolution, and plant-based natural medicine. Her work is rooted in evidence, but led by empathy, and her story gives so many women permission to trust their bodies and begin again. Camilla, welcome to class.
Thank you so much, Autumn. Thank you for having me.
Of course. I hope I said Ubud correctly. Is that how you say it?
Yeah,
okay.
Look, people say it in all sorts of ways. I mean, the Balinese, I think the word originally is ubad, which actually means medicine. This is a healing portal of the world. It's incredible.
Wow, that's amazing.
So it draws people who are healers, or it draws people who are looking for healing.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. To visit sometime.
You should. It's great.
So before we dive into your experience and all the healing and everything, I would love if you could give just a brief overview of PMDD for people who maybe don't know what it is, and like the major misconceptions around it.
Yeah, absolutely. As we were discussing before we went live, I'm, only a few days out from my next period. So my brain is at its lowest capacity of the month. So I'll try and do as good a job as possible. PMDD stands for Pre-Menstrual Dysphoric Disorder. It's actually affects, they estimate, around 5 to 8% of women, or 1 in 20 of a menstruating age. So it's actually far more common than one might consider for something that's so little known. It's not just little known in the public, but it's little known by healthcare professionals as well. And certainly when I was talking to particularly a male doctor about it, I had a terrible experience where he had no idea what it was and said something super offensive about it. But it's not actually people would think it's a more severe form of PMS, but it's actually not. It is more severe, but it's caused by something different. So PMS is generally about abnormalities in hormone levels, whereas the hormone levels of women with PMDD can be perfectly normal. What's not normal, unfortunately, is the body's response to the normal fluctuations of hormones that we expect and experience over the course of our menstrual cycle. What it looks like in reality is that for 1 to 2 weeks of the month following, once you've completed ovulation, your life tends to be turned upside down. It can present as very severe depression, very severe anxiety, out of control rage, insomnia, huge brain fog, huge fatigue. So those are some of the most common symptoms. So it's actually a cyclical mood disorder. So PMS, most of us have experienced it or do experience it to some degree. It's not fun. Our breasts might hurt. We might feel a little bloated. We might be a little bit more likely to cry when we watch something romantic or sad in a movie. But it doesn't turn your life upside down, whereas PMDD can really threaten relationships. It can really threaten your work life. It leads you, because of the really feeling as though your body and your mind have been hijacked for a week or two out of every month. It can really damage your self-worth. People can experience suicidal thoughts because it's such a difficult thing to cope with. After you resume your normal personality again, which tends to happen pretty much as soon as you come on your period, then you're often left with a lot of shame and really not understanding who this person was who hijacked your body for the first 2 weeks. And it's not a nice thing to deal with. I've experienced a lot of health challenges in my life, but that was the one that was so difficult for me to live with, that it really forced me to do a level of deep emotional healing that I had never done before. And that happened as a result of me really realizing that this was a trauma related condition, as opposed to just something that was about, leading a healthy lifestyle. So that's a short version of
Yeah.
PMDD.
It's so interesting. 5 to 8% seems like because like you said, like it's like more than you would think for something that we just really don't talk about enough. So I can't even
No.
imagine what, like, if it was something that more people understood, and if your traditional like psychological exams and neuropsych exams actually asked questions about the cycle as well. I wonder how high those numbers would get too. Because it's also just like written off as PMS a lot. People will be like, I
Yes.
get like depressed before my period. And the doctor goes, yeah, okay. So does everyone else. And you're like, no, but this is pretty debilitating. And it's also interesting what you say about like feeling like somebody's hijacked your body. Like, just in my experience with it, that is such a great explanation, because I can't relate to, like, once I get my period and I'm in my follicular phase and I think back to what, like, I cannot for those feelings if I tried. It is so
100%.
detached from me. It feels like somebody else entirely. It's so weird.
Yes. I
Yeah.
agree. Yeah, it felt like someone else stepped into my body. And when I was suffering with PMDD, I would say to my partner at the time, I'd be like, I'm an angel for like 2.5 weeks out of the month. Like, this is who I am. I'm not this person. Like, please just be
Mhm.
nice to me before my period so that we don't have
Mhm.
these huge arguments. It was awful. I would actually intentionally stay in a different state from my partner as much as possible before my period, because I just couldn't risk, I didn't want that relationship to fall apart. And I felt like I couldn't risk being around him, because I don't know how this person is going to behave who's taken over my body. And it's absolutely heartbreaking. And I guess what makes it even more heartbreaking is that we now know that there's a big correlation between women who've experienced adverse childhood events, women who've experienced emotional neglect, trauma, etc., etc. And so people who've already gone through more than enough in their lives are often the people who experience PMDD. Now I can feel myself getting a bit emotional talking about it.
Yeah.
It's just it's so heartbreaking, it's so unfair, and it's such an
Mhm.
awful thing to happen to people.
Mhm. It truly is. Speaking more with your experience, like, when did you first start to realize those symptoms? Like, was this a lifelong thing, or did they really come to a head at a certain point? And did you think they were like, did you think it was just PMS, or were you like, something's really not right here?
Do you know what? I was thinking about it this morning, and the when I realized that it was completely obvious to me was the time where I had full blown PMDD. And, this is the point at which I managed to treat it myself using all of these holistic methods that I now help other people with. So that full blown PMDD started after I left a very abusive relationship. And I was single for more or less a year, a little less than a year, before I met my next partner. And I didn't experience it at the beginning, but it was crazy. So how I realized and how I started going down this track of, oh, it's a trauma thing, is because in the very abusive relationship I was in, my partner, he used to scream these things at me, these horrible, horrible words. He would scream at me, and I'd be in the car and I'd just be frozen. And he would just be shouting. I would be saying nothing, just there freezing. And it was amazing. They had obviously become locked in my body, because what started happening premenstrually was, if my next partner would do something that triggered me in some way, I would start screaming the words that my previous partner had screamed at me. So it was like completely out of control. And, you know, these are not words that I would want to say to anyone. Like we were saying, it's like somebody else has hijacked your body. And it was just crazy. It was like PTSD was happening for me every month.
Mm-hmm.
And I was already a naturopath by that point. And so, you know, I knew what we do with PMDD from a diet and a lifestyle and a supplement perspective. And I tried all of these things. And it had never been taught to us in naturopath school that there was this trauma component. But because of my own experience, I dug deeper and I realized that that was kind of the missing piece that really needed addressing. So whilst, you know, I took all of the things, everything I could get my hands on, and I had this perfect diet and lifestyle, it made things better and it really does help. It's very, very supportive to be able to have all of those tools, but really the missing piece was the trauma processing work, because what was happening was every month my body was basically trying to release and process all of the trauma that I had been through. So yeah, that was kind of when it really was PMDD. But funnily enough, it flashed back in my mind for the first time this morning. When I was 18, somebody that I was working with said to me, you have really extreme premenstrual, you know, you're really, like, I can see your mood is really affected before your
Mm-hmm.
your menstruation, and you should try evening primrose oil. And it's funny. So, you know, perhaps I did actually have some of it back then, but then I went on the pill for a gazillion years.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was also totally fine for many years. And then obviously, unfortunately, I ended up in this awful relationship that, yeah, traumatized it back into me.
That's so interesting with the trigger. You know, it was probably in you and was living in you. And obviously, that memory
Yeah.
of when you were 18 is an indicator that perhaps, you know, it was always a little sensitive in
Yeah.
the later half of your cycle. But then just having something to like really, you know, bring it all to a head.
Yeah.
It's so interesting, and it's so sad that we don't like in doctors' offices. This isn't something that's being talked about, and I think that's such a disservice to women
Yeah. It
because it's
really
so
is.
important. It's very
Yeah.
important.
I,
Oh yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think this is talking about doctor's offices. I think I shared with you on our first call about how I was in a doctor's office and I spoke about my PMDD to a male doctor, and he told me that I was really lucky that my boyfriend put up with my PMT. Unbelievable. Just great.
Yep. Leave it to the male doctors.
As if that's not doing a disservice to women.
Oh my God, yeah. That's just like, oh my God. Like, I'm the one dealing. What about me? I'm the one dealing with it. He's fine. He'll be okay.
Oh,
I'm the one
yeah.
who's like literally has a gremlin take over their body every month.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
I also in high school, like when you said that about
Mm.
your coworker pointing that out to
Yeah.
you, it made me think how my immediate family and like my mom especially would always be like, you're really kind of unbearable right before your period. But it was my mom. So I was like, just shush, like,
Yeah.
just leave me alone. I'm fine. Leave me alone. So yeah, it's really, really interesting how traumas throughout your life can
Yeah.
bring triggers, and how doctors just aren't helpful all the time when it comes to things like
No.
this. And I can only hope that for the next generation, there's a lot more understanding for women's health in general, but especially with mental health, because even with, you know, I have generalized anxiety disorder, and I do agree with that diagnosis. I do have anxiety throughout the month, but it's cyclical either way, you know,
Mm.
like, because your cycle
Yeah.
just affects everything. So it does get worse at certain times. Were you ever like diagnosed with something different and tried to treat that through like a Western lens, or you didn't go that way?
No, I haven't. I mean, I'd say that everything that I've been told I've had has been pretty accurate. And then, I mean, I'd say in my later years, I kind of stayed out of the medical model anyway, because the traditional medical model, because, you know, I was already a naturopath and I'd already achieved, you know, huge resolution of my own health conditions from natural methods. And I've been quite, to be honest, and I've got to just take a moment to recognize that there are some incredible doctors out there, and that, you know, a lot of modern medicine is life-saving. So I don't want to, you know, put it down too much.
Right.
But in terms of the experiences that I had from my health conditions, it's only been extremely underwhelming. You know, I had arthritis since I was 19, and I was only diagnosed with that when I was 23, but I was, you know, in excruciating pain. And yeah, I mean, I wasn't offered anything of any benefit. And then I went vegan and my arthritis disappeared in 2 weeks after having had it for like 10 years. So, you know, I can see the power of diet,
Right.
and such an anti-inflammatory diet. And then with panic disorder, I I had severe panic disorder. I was having panic attacks every single day. I've been hospitalized for panic attacks before. I've had panic attacks. This was during half the time that this was a real problem for me was when I was in that very abusive relationship, and I was actually at uni at that point. And I remember there was a panic attack that I had that was so bad I couldn't get off the floor for 4 hours. I couldn't walk. You know, so severe panic attacks. And the methods that I use now to support people with their own mental health, with the same that I use for PMDD, I managed to get rid of my panic attacks in 5 sessions, and I managed to help somebody else get rid of theirs in 1 session. You know, somebody who came crying to me with panic attacks, and, you know, my heart went out to him. And he messaged me afterwards and he was like, my brain just feels like a completely different person. And, you know, that's not even, my sessions are incredibly reasonably priced. This is not me charging someone $5,000 to get rid of their panic attacks or something. It's, you know, there actually is accessible and reasonably priced, incredibly effective, holistic alternatives to, you know, just here's a pill, you're going to take it for the rest of your life, you're going to gain a huge amount of weight, you're probably going to feel suicidal, but you might not have a panic attack. You might, but it might reduce like 1 of every 5 panic attacks you have, or something like this. And so, yeah, I do have a lot of respect for the life-saving potential of modern medicine, but in terms of treating health challenges like this, it's not my first place to go.
Yeah, I completely agree. I always say, I know I've said this on at least 2 other episodes before. If I'm having a heart attack, I want a cardiologist in the room.
That's
However,
right.
when it comes to anxiety or PMDD or, you know, even certain aspects of my endometriosis, I want a much more holistic approach, and not that I don't explore Western medicine as well, but it needs to be, you know, like fully holistic. So let's talk more about your, like, the modalities that you use
Yeah.
with yourself and with clients. Can you like dive into that a little bit more?
Sure. Okay, so the various things that I offer. So I have been on this path for a long time. I've been in the wellness industry for about 15 years, but I actually did my Reiki level 1 and 2 back in 2006. So it's been a long time that I've been involved in this kind of healing work. And yeah, I started off as a Kundalini yoga instructor. Kundalini yoga is a deeply healing system. It's known as the yoga of awareness, and it's not just about the physical body at all. It's incredibly powerful for healing. And I actually incorporate Kundalini yoga and meditation into my PMDD online course, into retreats as well. And then I became a naturopath. So I did a 4-year health science degree in naturopathy, where you're learning anatomy, physiology, pharmacology, pharmacognosy, herbal medicine, nutrition, clinical diagnostics, examination, blah, 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 blah. So we kind of, for those who don't know what a naturopath is, we're kind of taking the role of a doctor In the part of the world where I was trained, I'm not considered a doctor. In America or Canada, I would be, if I had trained there. We're kind of taking the role of the doctor, except we're supporting people with lifestyle, nutrition, and herbal medicine, and other holistic approaches, for mostly for chronic health conditions. And again, please, if you're having a heart attack, don't come and see your naturopath, go to the hospital. But yeah, for anything else where it's more a chronic problem, these approaches can just change everything. So yeah, I specialize in plant-based nutrition, although that doesn't mean that I just see vegans or vegetarians by any means. It just means that that's something I've done myself for like 10 years and have been studying for almost 20. It's completely changed my life and I have a lot of expertise in it. So, I'm certainly not telling all my clients to go vegan or vegetarian, but I certainly will be encouraging them to eat more plants, for instance, and I won't be putting them on the carnivore diet. So, yeah. And then the newer parts for me that I've been doing for the last, let's say, 4 years, pretty much around the time that I had PMDD and started going into these, is the trauma processing work. That has just been incredible. So one of the methods that I work with, you may well have heard of. It's growing in recognition worldwide now. It's called family constellations. And it's actually considered so effective in some parts of the world that they even use it in divorce court proceedings to speed up proceedings and keep people, not needing to come back to court for years, which is really cool. And it's an amazing method of ancestral healing. And often the things that we carry don't come from us. They come from our parents. They come from the generations, moving all the way backwards. And when we can give the things that aren't ours back to our family lineage, we just free ourselves up so much, and we can actually experience resolution of health conditions that way. We can totally really different trajectory for our lives. We can experience and develop a lot of us, especially a lot of people who've been through a lot of things, may well have a very insecure attachment style, and I certainly did. Family constellations actually can really help us develop a very secure attachment style. It kind of has 1,000,001 applications, and I love working with it, and it's just such an honor to do that work with people. It's so moving and deep and beautiful, and you'll just be so surprised how much comes up. And family constellations was it was one of the big things that helped me on my healing journey post PMDD. And a lot of us, if we've experienced domestic violence or we've experienced sexual abuse, it's because that runs in our family, whether that directly has happened to us or whether it's just an energetic imprint that we're carrying. I had experienced a lot of sexual abuse, and I definitely don't think that didn't have a lot to do with my PMDD, to be really honest. And the work that I do now for other people, but I did myself back then, it really helped me return that energy to the family system so that it could be processed in a really healthy, beautiful way and without me carrying that anymore. And it's kind of night to day how my life is now that I've done that work.
Yeah.
It used to be a bit of when we're carrying that energy, we tend to be magnets for perpetrators, not intentionally, but there's something in our energy fields that actually draws in people who are also carrying that energy themselves, but perhaps in the perpetrator role. And so, yeah, I have far safer and better experiences in my life since doing that. And then the other process that I use, the other modality, is based on family constellations. It's called rapid core healing. It's not well known at all, but it's incredibly effective and super gentle, super effective. It's an amazing trauma processing method for personal trauma, but it also is taking into account the generational aspects of where trauma comes from. Yeah, those are the things that I work with, and I love them. Yeah. And I love working with other people with them. It's just such an honor to see how much they can help other people.
Yeah, that's amazing. I feel like I've heard of those things conceptually, but not like
Mm.
by name, I guess.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting that you say that, because I literally said like these exact words to my boyfriend before. And we hadn't been dating that long at this point, and I really thought he was going to think I was crazy, but I was reading The Body Keeps the Score
Yes. Yeah.
by Dr. Vanderkolk, and it's a very popular one, but it took me a very, very long time to get through, because if I read more than like 10 pages at a time, I had like a deep, just almost like trauma response, I guess, because a
I
lot
had
of
the
this.
same.
Did you really? Because a lot of
I
those
couldn't read
stories,
it. I
it
felt
was
I was
so
constantly being triggered by
difficult.
it. Yeah.
Yes, yeah, because a lot of those stories are very much based around, sexual violence and women and girls,
Mm.
and how those had all manifested in life. And I literally said to my boyfriend the one time, I was in such a funk because I had read like 3 chapters all at once. And he was like, "What is up with you?" And I was like, "This might sound insane." But he knew that I was reading that book and like what it was about and stuff. And I was like, I just feel like I am holding ancestral weight
Yeah.
of all of the women in my bloodline. Like, I
Yeah.
don't even know how to describe it. And he didn't, I mean, he was like, "Yeah, no, like that doesn't sound crazy at all." And I was like, "Okay, good." Because I really thought he was going to be like, "What's wrong with her?" But it really, really, that sounds like such incredible work. And I'm glad I have names for these things. I'm definitely going to look into it more, and like look into
Yeah.
your services more as well, because that definitely just like stirred something in me, I feel like, talking about that. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And the interesting thing is, so yes, I actually, it was around the time that I was on this journey that I was reading that book, and I couldn't read it. It was causing a huge panic inside me, and I couldn't proceed. But the interesting thing is, I probably could read it now, because now that I've actually processed my own trauma around sexual abuse and around domestic violence, it doesn't feel like it's in my body anymore. The amazing thing is, it's actually astounding how quickly, using the methods that I now work with that help me recover, how quickly that can move out of our body. Because until we've processed that, until we've got that out of our physical and energetic body and our subconscious mind and everywhere else that is causing havoc, we are carrying that. You are carrying your ancestral weight. We all are,
Yeah.
until we do this kind of work. And it's
Mm-hmm.
so life-changing once we do.
Yeah.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to say, because you mentioned about the generalized anxiety disorder, I would say I had that my entire life until I'm 37 now, let's say 34, something like that. And I remember that, and there were times where it was so bad, that I was
Yeah.
well aware that I was very, very anxious. But
Mm-hmm.
I didn't realize until I did. So I've done a lot of this work myself now. And I did one particular session with a friend as a swap. And after that session, I realized that my body wasn't holding any anxiety anymore. And it was only once it wasn't holding the anxiety that I actually realized I've been carrying a baseline anxiety my entire life, even when I wasn't aware that it was anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
And luckily, I don't experience that anymore. There's very, very, very rare occasions where, I might have to give a public speech or something. And like, of course, I'm a
Mm-hmm.
bit anxious because I'm
Yeah.
human. But it's so different. I used to have to go for like 5 lengthy walks a day, just to burn off this
Mm-hmm.
level of adrenaline that was running through my body. And after that, I was like, oh God, now I actually have to force myself to exercise, because I don't just need to, because I'm like
Yeah.
this frantic, scared
Mm-hmm.
bunny rabbit that I've been my whole life.
Yeah. 100% relate to that. It's like, and I feel like recently, I have, the past like year or so, I have definitely started to do more nervous system stuff, just like somatic healing. I did like a somatic healing program at one point. And I do a lot of like the EFT tapping now, and trying to like
Nice.
uncover these limiting beliefs and things like that. And whenever I have like like just a moment where I don't have that baseline anxiety, it'll literally just be a moment before I realize it, and then it's back. because I just think myself back into it. It's like I'm getting better at holding it, but it's like there's something there that just is so hard to release no matter how much I breathe into it, just like in my gut, like that sort of frantic feeling. So that's so relatable for me, at least. I'm sure there's definitely listeners who are also relating to that a lot, because we're all fairly anxious these days.
Yeah.
There's a lot going on.
And I'd like to share that I don't know if this is true, but I think it may be true, that if we're really struggling to release that, and if part of us is talking us back into it, it's because that part of us is trying to keep us safe in some way. It's not that our body is malfunctioning, it's just that it's really trying to keep us safe. Mm-hmm. And so what the rapid core healing that I do, go into that part, and we assure that part that we are just going to help it work in a much more productive way whilst keeping autumn, for instance, completely safe. And then we allow ourselves to process whatever came up that caused that part to exist in the first place. And that it's, I would imagine that it's part of you, it's part of your body that in its divine love of you is trying to keep you safe, but it's just doing something that's kind of inconvenient and not helpful for the scenario that you're living in, the reality that you're living in today.
Yeah, absolutely. And I could probably think of a few ways in which it would, where that maybe stems from childhood and where it's trying to keep me safe, for sure. Okay, so for any listeners out there who maybe are new to the idea of nervous system healing, this is the first they're hearing of it at all. Can you explain it more in the context of women's health and PMDD? And just maybe more of like an elementary level for people who are confused.
Let me give it a go. Like I said, my brain's not at its full capacity today. But with PMDD, for instance, there are a few things that are going on. There's dysregulation to do with allopregnanolone. I can never pronounce that. That is affecting GABA, which is basically what keeps us calm. And then there is dysregulation in the luteal phase of our cycle that's related to serotonin as well, which is obviously our happy hormone and makes us feel good. And then there's dysregulation often because of that early life trauma with the HPA axis. This altogether is going to affect our nervous system. It's going to keep us in a much more heightened state than we would like to be. That can then cause all sorts of issues in the body, whether that be contributing to things like cyclical mood disorders in general, other mental health challenges. It also drives inflammation, which we know is a big contributor of almost any health condition that we can think of. So, and it has, when our nervous system is dysregulated as well, it has a massive impact on gut health as well. So when I'm working with people with gut health, which is probably my biggest client base for plant-based naturopathy nutrition, I really need to see them doing nervous system work. It doesn't have to be the trauma work necessarily, but nervous system work could include breath work, pranayama. So I teach that on my courses as well. It could include yoga. It could include, I love the trauma releasing exercises. So if you want something free that you can start that's super easy to do, and just go on YouTube and just put in trauma releasing exercises, and that's allowing our body, we don't actually even need to know about what it is that we're holding on to. That is initiating the natural shake response that we're supposed to have, that other animals, when they're in the wild, if for example they are running away from a predator, then once they're safe, their whole body shakes And that's how they discharge that. And that's how they don't end up with PTSD. Whereas we don't do that. And we often even take, sometimes we actually take medication if that shaking comes up to suppress that just lodges it further into our body. So, what I needed to do after getting out of the car with my ex each time that he would do that is I needed to be shaking all of that out of my body. But instead it got stored in my nervous system, stored in my cells, and it would come up whenever the hormones, the normal hormonal fluctuations that my body was just ultra sensitive to, it would come out of my body that way. So I hope that gives some overview.
Definitely. Because you're right, it's so important when we do watch animals in the wild, like that's what they do, and they're constantly moving, and we're also just throughout our day, like a lot of people aren't getting enough exercise even throughout the day, which can also help move things through.
Definitely.
Yeah, so it can be very, very damaging and get stored in the body. And I think the part about like you don't even have to know, because I think that's something I don't like that. Like I know that I don't have to be able to name the trauma, but I want to. I want to know where it comes from.
You're probably like my method then, rapid core healing, because we regress you back to wherever it came from. And the amazing thing is it often has nothing to do with what you would think it would have to do. So for instance, with the gentleman with panic attacks, his started after he took recreational drugs, maybe in his in his mid 40s or something. And but when we did the regression, the panic part actually came from him being 3 years old with his parents fighting. So once we processed that, the panic attack stopped. So it's actually kind of amazing how these things can surface in our later life that actually have something to do with something that happened years ago that we would have never ever thought of or remembered, and that might not even seem like, we have big T trauma, like, sexual abuse or domestic violence, or any form of abuse really. And war veterans, their experiences, those are obviously big T traumas. But there's small T traumas where it might just be an instance in your childhood where your mum wasn't paying attention to you when you really needed her to. These things that we may have no idea are actually playing such a huge role in our adult life, can actually be running the show.
Yeah, which is just so insane, really, when you think about it. Like how transformative those years are in your early childhood, and the things that really stick with you versus the things that don't. It's really incredible how we have these modalities that we are able to work through those things. And I wish they were more commonplace, honestly.
I
think that would be very useful for a lot of people. So you mentioned, like, being able to just go on YouTube, look up somatic healing or traumatic release, like exercises and stuff. What other like very like actionable steps do you have for people who are maybe, especially for women who are maybe like, do I have PMDD, listening to this episode thinking that maybe they're a little bit, it's more than just PMS? What advice do you have for them? What other things can they do?
I mean, my website has resources, pmddnaturopath.com, and I'm looking to add more and more resources. In terms of, look, you could definitely go to your doctor and you could tell them what your symptoms are and say that this is what you suspect that you have. And hopefully, if they're a good doctor, they will validate you, or they will ask further questions and direct you to something else. But if you are diagnosed by a Western medical doctor with PMDD, then the only options they have for you are antidepressants, the oral contraceptive pill, or a hysterectomy, really. There are a couple, I don't think they've been used in clinical trials. There've been a couple of other medications as well, but I've never heard of anyone being recommended them by their general practitioner. So I think those are, from what I gather, they're the only options available. I would really, I mean, how I like to support people is through a multi-pronged approach where we are looking at the natural medicine. We're supporting, because that's going to be one of the quickest ways to, without side effects or with absolute minimal side effects, be able to reduce the symptoms. And then in terms of nutrition, I would be wanting to go for as anti-inflammatory a diet as possible. That means as many plant foods as possible. And by plant foods, I don't mean bags of chips or Coca-Cola. I mean like adding more greens, adding some plant protein instead of meat where you can, adding more fruits, veggies, like, fresh whole plant foods is going to be very anti-inflammatory. Looking at your omega-3 intake. So my top choice for omega-3, that again, most people haven't heard of, but it's actually the highest natural source of omega-3, is called ahi flour, spelled AHI flour. And it's a plant-based source that's regeneratively grown and amazing. It's also a really good source of GLA, which obviously is brilliant that's what we find in evening primrose oil, is brilliant for PMS, PMDD. So that's, natural medicine, nutrition, sleep. You want to be making sure that you are getting as much good quality sleep before midnight as possible. I'd be really looking at ensuring the relationships around you are as supportive and safe as possible, because it's very, very hard to recover from when you're in an unsafe relationship. And again, that actually comes down to the nervous system, because if you're not feeling safe in your relationships and your home environment, your nervous system is going to be constantly overworking and not able to heal. And then I'd be looking for whether it's my methods, if they speak to you, or whether it's another method of trauma processing work. There are many available. I have tried many, and these have been my favorite too, from perspective of speed, efficacy, safety, etc., etc. But there are so many. So if something else speaks to you, go for that. And the final piece would be, so other kind of nervous system work, whether you like your EFT tapping, which is obviously brilliant, whether you like the idea of yoga nidra, whether you like the idea of meditation or breath work. I mean, YouTube is just a brilliant place to be able to access any of these things for free, to be honest. Obviously, it's lovely to go to an in-person class. That's an alternative as well. Those are probably the steps that I would really recommend exploring, and kind of evaluating like which of these areas are you a little bit weaker on, perhaps, and putting a bit more love and care and attention into those parts. You might already have the perfect diet, but you really know that your body needs some nervous system support or some trauma processing or whatever it is, and just putting more attention to that.
Yeah, absolutely. I also like how you say sleep, like as much sleep as possible before midnight. I feel like a lot of people don't add that little caveat in there, and it's so important. Like if you have, if you sleep from 8 to 5 or 9 to 5 or whatever, versus if you sleep from 1 in the morning to 8 in the morning, like it doesn't matter if you're getting, it's very different. It doesn't matter how many hours of sleep you get. If I go to sleep after midnight, I'm going to be a wreck the next day, no matter what. So
I think it's very 100%, important. Definitely. And like we've said, PMDD doesn't actually have that much to do with hormones as such, or at least with the sex hormones, but they do say, and this is one thing I feel like I've just internalized this as truth, because it rings as true to me, but I really should see if there's actually research to support this. But it's often said that the hours before midnight are really the most important for our hormonal health. So I can just tell you from personal experience that it's a totally different experience if you go to bed after midnight.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I believe it, because when we look at the traditional Chinese medicine clock as well, like the organ clock, what the liver is like 11 to 1 or something like that, isn't it? Or
is it
something like
that. I feel like it might be like 2 a.m. maybe.
2 a.m.
Something around that. I could be wrong. But I remember, I used to wake up around that time, and I was working for a TCM doctor at the time, and I'm pretty certain that he said it was, that I'll need to look that one up again.
Yeah. Well, just because the, liver plays such an important role in metabolizing hormones and stuff. So either way, you're supposed to be in a fairly deep sleep at that point. You're supposed to have
You sure are.
the recovery going on. Yeah, so sleep's very important, and the hours that you sleep are also very important. Well, this has been incredible. I have one last question that I like to ask all of my guests. If you could rewrite the health class curriculum that every woman deserves, what would your first lesson be?
Such a beautiful question. I'd just be adding the trauma aspects to everything, to be honest. And I'd also be, if we're giving lessons, I would be giving lessons on how to keep women safe, because most of us were raised, I was raised, it really took, until I was mid 30s to actually understand that so much of what I'd experienced was sexual abuse, or, so much of what I'd experienced was wrong. And we're not taught to identify these things. We're not taught where to get help. We're not taught how to keep ourselves safe, psychologically and physically. We're not taught how to choose healthy relationships, or what love bombing looks like, or what the signs that somebody is actually, whether they're abusing you in a very obvious way, which usually only happens later down the line. No one walks into a relationship and they're like, hey, I'm an abuser. And you're like, yeah, brilliant. I'm signing up for that. That's not how it works. But what coercive control is, and things like this, because it's so common for women to experience these things. And this is why I'm really passionate about talking about my own experiences now, because I never learned about any of these things. And to be honest, it wasn't socially acceptable in my society in my background to discuss these things. This was something that happened to other people, but, we'd never talk about these things. And they just have such a huge impact on our mental and physical health. And so that is the part that I would be adding.
Yeah, that's incredible. And you're so right. Just with not even knowing not having names for things, like not having names for assault or harassment, or what love bombing is. Like I have a very distinct memory sitting at 18 years old in my freshman orientation for college. And that is the first time I ever got any sort of consent, like, education. And it was such like a moment for me where I was like, oh my God, wait a second, that stuff isn't okay. And this has a name. There's a name for this, because it was so black and white as a child, and especially growing up in the Catholic Church as well. It was a very black and white, like it was like sex or no sex, or, and slight trigger warning here, rape or not raped. And the gray area was just never talked about. They pretended it didn't exist.
I know, 100%. How convenient for them.
Exactly. Well, exactly. Yeah.
It's pretty appalling. I remember reading, I won't keep you too long, but really quickly, I remember reading something that it wasn't even written that many decades ago. It was maybe like 10 or 20 years ago. And it was kind of asking people's general opinion of like what constituted sexual abuse. And like pretty much nothing aside from rape was what, the general public, I believe it was including women, considered to be, it's wild. So, and talking about mental health, I am just so grateful the conversation is changing. I had depression when I was 12. I've struggled with my mental health until, a few years ago for my entire life. And I was 12 and I was miserable and I didn't really want to be alive. And I remember asking my mum to get me help. And my mum said, we can't get you help because otherwise that will ruin your job prospects. So, I was this child who wanted to die, but it was more important that, my job prospects were protected. It's just, thank God conversations are changing. And
yes. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That is it's horrible, but that was just such a common mentality of what are other people going to think?
Yeah.
And you're like, that doesn't matter. We have to put out this fire first. Yeah. Yeah. It's so true. You have shared So much incredible wisdom on today's episode. I know I obviously resonated with so much of it, and I'm sure that there are so many women out there listening that are also going to resonate with this. Where can people find you?
They can find me at pmddnaturopath.com if they're looking for PMDD support. If they're looking for anything else, it's camillaclaire.com. And you're more than welcome to connect with me on Instagram at Camilla Claire Naturopathy.
Awesome. I will link all of those below in the show notes as well. Thank you all for listening. Please rate and review to help me out. Make sure you share this episode with a friend that you think would benefit from it. And class dismissed.